co-founder breakup here turned into a bit of an explosion one day. The sheer amount of pressure, much like a breakup, it was awful. 60% of startups fail if they lose a co-founder. It's like, how do you bounce back from that? And we got to work, focusing intensely on our core proposition. I saw like the incredible amounts of anxiety of friends coming out, 2 friends who were made homeless. I wanted so badly to be able to help support. It is really inaffordable. We have to look at alternative means. I knew at that moment I wanted to go much more into mental health. We also just ran an ad for a day and it completely took off. One day waking up and we just completely doubled the users. We were validating a problem. Yeah. We weren't validating a solution.
Are you solving a deep enough pain point that people are willing to part with their cash for this?
Reductions in depression and anxiety of over 50%.
Wow.
It hasn't been easy surrounding yourself with amazing people.
Hello and welcome back to Strategy and Tragedy, the show all about how to scale and fail in business. Join me for regular interviews with some incredible guests, including the likes of Mandy Nyako, MBE, Liv Ferdy of Trip Drinks, Nick Towson-Sillett of Design My Night, and so many other inspirational entrepreneurs that I've had the honor of interviewing. Today's guest is, of course, no exception. But just before we dive in, a big thank you to you. I really appreciate you tuning into this show. And of course, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Okay, on to my next guest. Daniel Botcherby is the co-founder and CEO of Kalda, the world's first LGBTQIA+ mental wellbeing app that provides self-guided therapy programs and daily reflection journaling. Formed in Antler and grown in Unrest, 2 phenomenal accelerators in the UK. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hey Steph, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm even happier to be sat across from you. So I'd love to hear you describe Kalda in your own words. What is it exactly?
So we're a mental wellbeing platform providing video therapy sessions as well as therapeutic journaling. And we're solving this urgent need, this mental health crisis for LGBTQ youth. So in the community, 1 in 2 will experience depression every year. And for anxiety, it's as high as 2 in 3.
Wow, those are crazy stats.
It is. And then when it comes to actually accessing support, it's even worse.
Yeah.
So we have long wait lists of up to 2 hours. The cost of private therapy is so expensive. It can be up to £150 a session.
Right.
And then finally, when trying to access and speak to clinicians, 1 in 4 have experienced discriminatory remarks from healthcare staff. So there's a lot of fear in people wanting to access mental health support. So it's gotten to the point where 87% of queer youth want to have access to mental health support, but out of those, 50% who want it aren't able to access it due to fear, price, and relevancy.
Wow, those stats are so impactful. You clearly know your numbers, but on a more personal, emotional level, I'm guessing there's some lived experiences that have led up to you forming Kalda. Do you mind sharing? Is there more of a personal journey here for you?
Absolutely. So, growing up, I'm a third culture kid, and I grew up in a school system where there was a law that completely banned any education in anything LGBTQ+. So I didn't have any way of like learning or accessing information other than through online sources or through like late night TV. And like I didn't have a way of navigating like the experiences that I was going through. And having a multi-sexual identity meant that ultimately I could still pass like in the dominant society as like and it wasn't until much later at uni where I was able to like basically explore and be connected to other people in the community. Like that's where I first fully started to ask myself much more meaningful questions. But through that time I saw like the incredible amounts of anxiety of friends coming out. I had 2 friends who were made homeless when they were like outed, and that just like really just weighs on you in terms of like the mental health aspect.
Right.
And I wanted so badly to be able to help support, but I didn't have any of the tools or toolkit in order to help other than just speak to my friends. And it wasn't until around 2016 when I just happened to fall into a medtech company. I joined a company, really early employee in my cognition. And it was here that we actually built video games to prevent neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's.
Interesting.
And we actually created like a diagnostic tool, like a cognitive assessment that could measure your brain. And then we were able to reverse engineer that. During that time, the chief medical officer, a wonderful man named Brent, he and I spoke a lot about trying to build more inclusivity into the platform. So like up until that point, I think a lot of traditional systems were, just trying to get you to select, just male or female. And we wanted it to be more inclusive, to include our trans siblings. And we just found it such an uphill battle in order to just be more additive to all of these systems that we were trying to interface in. And it was at that moment that we actually started being able to use the same video game in younger populations. So we're using it for special educational needs. We're using it with teenagers with eating disorders, and then young adults with anxiety and depression. And kind of fast forward that whole roller coaster of being an early operator, the company was acquired, and I was suddenly left with this kind of opportunity to do whatever I wanted. And I knew at that moment I wanted to go much more into mental health, and also to find something to support the community with.
I love that. So not only have you been exposed to the startup world, being one of the first employees at this medtech, but also I guess you've been exposed to how tech solutions can help solve some of these problems, specifically as it relates to like mental health or brain health. So I have so many other questions that I want to ask you. You mentioned, you opened the conversation with all these really compelling stats. You've got your own personal story here, your lived experiences, and then the vicarious experiences of others. You mentioned your friends, those really sad stories. Has that all been enough? Like the data, the market research, the gap in the market, more of that analytical side, and then the emotional, the actual living those problems. Have those been enough for you in these early days to get that product validation, or is it still too early to ask you that question?
That is a great question. I would say it's given me the conviction.
Yeah.
And it's given me the unshakable resilience.
I love that.
To go through this journey. And I have I just have this belief, and it's pretty unshakable, that what we're doing is so critical and will be so effective and so helpful for the community. We're talking about a lack of emotional toolkit and therapeutic concepts that are really gatekept. I shouldn't say that. It is really inaffordable. It's so difficult for folk to be able to afford one-on-one therapy for periods longer than a month. And on top of that, it takes time to build a therapeutic alliance with your therapist, which could take 2 or 3 months. So you're kind of caught in a really difficult position. And then we know for a fact that there aren't enough clinicians being trained. And then when it comes to peer supporters or paraprofessionals, there still aren't enough of those qualifying either. So we just fundamentally have this acute lack of clinicians. So we have to look at alternative means. And that was really like a signal to me at my cognition of being able to use technology in order to diagnose and to intervene. And so that belief, and I saw it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I got to see the lives of kids change just by using a video game.
Yeah.
And it was that has helped me in this journey of trying to build a solution for the community. It hasn't been easy. We've had to do additional research. The community is made up of millions of people with all sorts of different sexualities and gender identities. And we have to be really aware of all of their needs. So we've interviewed over 500 people in order to kind of build some more understanding. We've spoken to the leading charities in the UK, charities out in the US as well. And we've spoken to I've lost count of the number of clinicians that we've spoken to.
Wow.
In order to build a data set of all of the topics and the concerns and the things that are relevant to the community for every part of the community as well. And so this is what we're kind of faced with now, is just like this huge understanding, but like with the need and urgent need to go and build and find that product market fit for the community.
Yeah, Daniel, I love that answer so much. Conviction, I think, is the magic word that I want to underscore there. And I can see it, not only in the words. I don't know if anyone's like listening or watching this on YouTube, but how much your body language sort of changed with that as well. That genuine conviction, that belief, that passion that you have genuinely comes across. I think that's really interesting as well. For early stage entrepreneurs, that conviction that drives you forward, that propels you, that helps you tell that compelling story to investors, to partners. It helps pick you up when you're down. And then along the way, you're gathering even more data and more information to further kind of back up this belief that you have. So I love it. You're definitely on the right track. So I mentioned 2 accelerators that you've been on.
Yep. With
Antler. So if anyone isn't already aware, very, very early stage program, accelerator. Did you already have the idea for Kalda at this point, or was that formed during the Antler accelerator? If you're enjoying this episode, then you can probably guess what I want you to do. Please do me one tiny favor that costs you nothing and takes a second of your time. Hit that subscribe button. It really helps to support the show, and I'm really grateful for you listening. Let's get back into it.
I think it was really honed in on during the program. So Antler is a day zero investor, and the model is that they bring in entrepreneurs and founders, also operators, and they help them form teams. The journey is hard enough alone, and to be able to share it with someone else just makes it that bit easier. And there I met 2 wonderful co-founders, and that was where we really, really distilled the vision exclusively for the community. I think when we joined, we had a number of different ideas around the mental health space, but we were still thinking kind of trying to serve everybody. But then as we researched further, it was a real clear understanding that we can't be everything for everyone. Such
an important lesson. I'm so glad you shared that on this show as well. Yep, that's a big one. So how did you, sorry, I jumped in there. So how did you go about honing in on your early adopters, your first kind of target audience?
So it was really just like, we just reached out to all our friends.
Yeah.
We had looked across the mental health landscape, and we saw that the area of peer support really was not saturated. And so we thought, okay, can we tap into this for the community, particularly because we're already like more prone to seek support from our friends, from our chosen families, and to navigate mental health issues like with each other. So we thought, can we leverage that within the community? Can we just create a social safe space where we can talk about mental health?
Makes sense.
So we just contacted all our friends. We set up a number of WhatsApp groups, and we just kind of gave them therapeutic questions every day. And we quickly saw, like, first we were testing for like how big should the groups be?
I was just going to ask that question.
Yeah, what would be the ideal number? And we found that kind of 5 and 6 was pretty effective, but then we found that after some time, people wanted to be connected to more. And so then we ended up creating just a Facebook group, and then we suddenly had 800 people on there. Oh my God. Like within a few weeks. And
wow. Was that through Hustle, or just people referring and inviting other people in?
It was through just like friends referring in. I think we also just ran an ad for a day, and it just completely took off.
Wow.
I remember that I remember just one day waking up and we had just completely doubled the users. Like it went from like 400 to 800 just like overnight. And I was like, oh, okay.
What great validation, right?
It definitely showed that. I think this was something that we had to learn, that we were validating a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
We weren't validating a solution at that point, or we thought we were. Like what were the needs for the business is that we needed to find a monetary kind of way of supporting the business. And one thing that was really important to us was protecting our users' data. We didn't want it to be sold. So then that really excluded us from the advertising models of the world. And so like, could we find it within the community? Would people want to pay to have access to this? And we gained some traction there, but it wasn't until like a couple months in that we realized actually this was like a red herring. Like we were just capturing just like, I think the earliest of adopters. What we had validated was essentially the model for a Facebook group. We had validated the model for a Reddit. Like we had just built another social space where people could connect, and it was a free space, and people didn't feel comfortable paying for it.
So what next? So how do you figure out how to turn this into a profitable business?
Exactly. And that was really kind of taking everything back to basics, like looking at the business from like, what is the problem that people were experiencing? And that was access to therapy. We knew already that one-on-one therapy, that's a no-go. We could create the marketplace, connect people to therapists, but again, it's
not solving the affordability problem,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So then we looked at group therapy. And so we still took this kind of peer support model, this group idea, and we thought, okay, can we like bring this to a more group therapy model? Some things immediately showed up. It was a scaling issue. So we could find a few pockets of group therapists that were very comfortable doing these group sessions. Also the factor of the intersection of like having lived experience or being a queer therapist, that was again really difficult to find.
A limiting factor, right?
And then we just ran it. Like before we even wrote the course or like built the group therapy, I was hitting phones and I was just calling people up, and we sold our first course before any of it was built.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like a really good signal for like, okay, we've definitely got a model here. So we went from like lots of users, no traction, to suddenly like a pocket full of users paying a fair amount of money in order to access a group therapy course. And through that process, we actually found, okay, how do we digitize it more? People loved the course. We were able to see reductions in depression and anxiety of over 50%.
Wow.
And that was in 6 weeks.
Wow.
But the biggest piece of feedback that we kept getting was like, I want to take this home. Like I want to be able to keep accessing this. And so it really led us down the path of like, okay, it seems like a subscription model may be in the works here. And that's essentially where we're at now, where we're kind of testing and learning. And like we're seeing really, really good signals of it so far.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's so interesting. Daniel, thank you so much for breaking down these steps in the early stage of entrepreneurship. Like it's so clear how you really do get these like early stage entrepreneurial startup types who are like really like problem solving, like really like what are people doing, observing user behaviors. At each stage in this process, it does sound very methodical. Did Antler help provide you with these frameworks, or was this kind of something you already knew, or did you have books or other people to turn to? For other people listening, again, it sounds very like we did this, then we did that.
I would love to say that
hindsight's a wonderful thing, right?
Yeah, I would love to say that there was like a rule book to this. I think like it was intuitive. Like my co-founder and I were like both product managers, product designers. So we kind of had kind of an intuition in relation to like how we might try to test different ideas.
Yeah. Well, genuine professional experience in that sense from product management. Yeah.
That's fair. Oh yeah.
Yeah, don't undermine yourself, Daniel.
But we were what Antler and the community, and I think this was something that was so undervalued or understated as part of being part of Antler or Unrest, is that the community that these programs bring and the founders and the network of advisors that all come together who are at different stages of a journey, who have different experiences, and it's that pool of knowledge that you should continuously tap into.
Lean on. Yeah, that's so nice.
And I think for us, like, how do we know what to do? Well, it was about survival. Like, it was like, we validated a problem. It was really making that distinction between, okay, we know that this is a problem. People really want this, but what we need to do is find the balance between what people want and what people are willing to pay for. Because we would love to, if we had gone down a route of setting up as an NGO or a charity, it'd be a different equation. We'd be giving everything away for free. That wasn't the motivation. But because we took venture capital, we had to find something that would actually provide a return.
Yeah. Daniel, there's so much entrepreneurial gold dust in this already. And I think especially that distinction between, yes, there's a problem you're solving, but actually, are you solving a deep enough pain point that people are willing to part with their cash for this? Is the difference between, as you say, essentially an NGO, a charity, and a business. I come across a lot of budding entrepreneurs who, of course, this is where there's so many healthy tensions in business, and it's always interesting to try and unpack them. But where they have an idea, they have a vision, and of course you need that to succeed in business, but there is a big risk of over-indexing on, this is how I see things, this is the vision that I have, this is how I would like the business to run, versus, that's lovely, what do your customers want? How can you solve their problems and build a scalable business off the back of that? So congratulations on getting to this point. I think it's really, really interesting, and so many insights in here. You mentioned co-founder. If we're okay to kind of move along to this stage in the story, you've spoken about a co-founder breakup that happened. Now, I don't know the details. If you can expand on that story here, I'd love to hear more.
Yeah. It was actually kind of during our, very, very early on, we just found a really big culture clash. And unfortunately, it turned into a bit of an explosion one day where we were just kind of really shaken to our core, the three of us. And we were just thinking, okay, how do we get through this? We have loved working with each other up until this point. And then suddenly that all just vanished. And
what was the sudden catalyst, if you don't mind me asking?
It was just the sheer amount of pressure that we were under and had put upon ourselves in order to build the business quickly, keep validating ideas. It's obviously in something incredibly personal to everyone in the team. And then you're trying to raise capital as well. And I think that, a lot of the founder well-being issues are related to, just having to hold everything continuously. It's really difficult to put down your laptop at the end of a day, to go home and separate yourself from the work. And so we were living it, we were literally there, and we couldn't stop thinking about it. And, it just ended with this event, let's put it that way. So then we just asked ourselves, how do we get through this? And one of the things, we're a mental health company. So one of the things that I just tapped into was let's go for group therapy. It's been pretty well documented about the founders from Basecamp. They did group therapy, and we thought, okay, this is a very good method for us to explore. We went to it. It was amazing. It was we had suddenly had almost a safe space again in order to reconnect and rebuild the bridges. And then we were, we went at it again, almost the next day, it was a new world. Unfortunately, the pressure of the founder experience, like caused this to happen again, this culture clash. And unfortunately, we tried again, like a few other steps. We tried like personal development weekends. We took the therapeutic lessons and frameworks that we'd already learned and applied them to us as well. And I'm kind of compressing a 9-month experience of like a co-founder breakup here. And unfortunately, it ended with us having to kind of, separate. And much like a breakup, like it was awful. Like, and, but it was the best thing for us with the available information that we had at the time. And, I think Kalda has been able to like both honor everything that has come before and also like to strive onward in order to be a support, to be a platform that we can use to help millions of people.
Yeah, that's a lovely way of putting it, Daniel. I really appreciate you opening up about that, because I know you've spoken about it publicly. It is a rare, I'm sure it happens more than we think, but it's rare to hear it. And whenever I do have co-founders on the show, I do often, I'm like, how did you meet? How do you work? How are you? And a lot of them have, maybe because they are further along anyway, they have cultivated these successful relationships. So it's like, cool, okay, like, great, good for you. This show is called Strategy and Tragedy for a reason, which is often the best lessons come from those big mistakes. So there's not a huge amount to kind of learn from that. So this is where I'm even more grateful for you opening up on that story there, because actually what can we learn from that experience? Were you both first-time founders at this stage?
Yes, so there were 3 of us.
Oh, okay.
And I would say that my other 2 co-founders were first-time founders. And this was my first venture-backed like endeavor. So
a different
so
setup.
Before I'd done some bootstrap tech products and I'd built an e-com business, but this is a completely different ball game,
different beast.
Like it's really like you're not the person in like, you're not the business, like you're running the business. And I think that's a really big step up, like moving into the world of venture. Like you're given money for a reason, and you need to deploy it strategically in order to make returns. And I think that was a huge lesson for us. The most amazing thing that came out of it was like a real like reflection on like, okay, we have learned so much in such a short space of time, like to lose a co-founder, and like 60% of startups fail if they lose a co-founder. It's like, how do you bounce back from that? And then we took everything back to basics, and it was at that moment, that was when we set up the group therapy course. So we had done and validated this problem, built this social platform, and then everything all happened at once. And we were kind of looking back to basics, and it was as the dust settled, we saw, okay, we need to put together an advisory board around us. Like we need to be able to have more points of information that we can draw upon, more strategic minds. So we met with Christian Tooley, who's now set up iCubed Investing, and he's like one of our superstar champion advisors at Kalda. We also met with several therapists, Matthijs Lucassen, who built one of the first eCBT video games for the community as well, which was amazing. And then Aura Ramala, an amazing DEI consultant who has supported us like so much through the journey. And that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't lost our co-founder.
Yeah, so good, like there's good that's come out of this. Again, it's like rising like a phoenix from the ashes. Can I just clarify, apologies, it was the one co-founder out of the 3 of you, so it's two out of 3 still standing now?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry, go on then, tell me.
So sadly, my next co-founder just stepped down, at the beginning of last year. And we had been on the journey now for like a couple years, and the roller coaster of building a startup was, it just came to an end for my co-founder, and we're still like incredibly close. It was like by contrast, you know, it was like night and day. It was like we had the worst co-founder breakup, and then I had the best and the most loving like co-founder breakup. And you know, the door is always open for my co-founder to come back in.
That's nice.
And it's been amazing, like to have had, I think, just all of the compiled learnings of seeing it from both ways.
Yeah, exactly. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
What have you learned from that? The two polar opposites.
From the two polar opposites, maybe I'm the problem. No.
Hey,
no.
It's me. No, I'm sure it's not, Daniel.
No, so it is like, what have I learned from this? I think it has been this early in the journey, like an incredible amount of focus is needed in order to understand the market, understand the solution, understand what our users are saying, and like to keep iterating. And I think like speed has been like a huge element of that learning. And you basically, if you're not in motion, like there isn't anything to draw upon.
Yeah.
So the more that we as a team and then individually becoming like a solo founder, throwing myself at different problems has been like the biggest inflection point in the journey. And I would say another big learning from this has been like surrounding yourself with amazing people.
Like your advisory board.
The advisory board. And then after Charlie stepped down, I looked at, okay, we had to kind of do a really healthy reframing, and like looking at like founders typically wear so many hats to do so many different roles, right? And like ultimately that has a huge factor in leading to burnout. So what are those roles? How do we break them down and really separate them? And how do we find somebody to tackle each one of those? So it ended up, Charlie was holding like 3 massive pieces of Kalda together. And so the only thing I could do was actually find 3 new people to replace Charlie.
Wow.
And like being really honest with where our gaps are and taking steps to fill those is what has led Kalda into like our second, you know, rising from the ashes moment.
Yeah, the rebirth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It's so interesting as well you've got such a unique, incredible story. And it's also just so rare to interview someone who has not only been in a co-founder relationship, but been through the drama and different versions of that. And now being solo founder, we have to touch on what's the best and the worst parts of being a solo founder now that you've had those different experiences.
I would say as a solo founder, you cannot run a business and fundraise at the same time. So you have to be very, very mindful of how you actually do that. I think in the venture landscape, it totally makes sense as to why generally like co-founder teams are preferred. So, and I think that there's just a factor of like the length of time it takes to raise funding. So what I had to do was I found 3 new teammates, and they basically became founding teammates in Kalda. So somewhere between like co-founder and like a joiner, and we got to work. Like again, it was taking things back to basics, trying not to do too much, focusing intensely on like our core proposition. And I think one of the other problems of being solo founder or even a co-founding team is just the shiny object syndrome of just being like bought in by a new idea, a new opportunity. And like I would say this is a huge credit for the community, for the startup ecosystem, is that there are opportunities everywhere. Like everybody wants to help you if you're passionate about your business, and like opportunities come up everywhere. And it's really about choosing like the path that you need to go down to, and kind of almost like building a minimum viable product. It's like you need to build like a minimum viable pathway to product market fit. I've just coined that one.
I love that. You heard it here first.
But It's just about focus, filling the gaps, being really transparent, just telling everybody. And this has been like a huge learning for me as well, just being able to like share like radically, like candidly, everything that's going on in the process, because it is a journey. Investors ultimately buy into the journey, and that I think this has been a learning, is that whatever you think is bad, an investor has seen it 10 times worse than somewhere else. And like I've heard like amazing stories now of like other bad investments, and it's really reassuring to have that parallel. It's to know that actually you're doing amazing and Kalda is doing fantastic. You should see the other guys.
Right. I love that. That's really reassuring to hear, isn't it? Because we're so focused on our business, what we're doing, especially if we're still kind of early on in the game. We haven't done like 10 businesses before. We don't have that benchmark or that frame of reference. So you mentioning that investors, they've seen much worse, is a nice reassurance to other founders. Like, you're probably doing better than you think you are. Daniel, you've already shared so many incredible pearls of wisdom, lots of lessons learned. Traditional closing question on the show, given the title, Strategy and Tragedy, what's one tragedy, in air quotes, one big mistake that's taught you an unforgettable lesson? And you may well have already covered this, but if you want to share something else before we wrap up here.
I think one of the mistakes that I would probably say happened very, very early on was not realizing, again, this goes back to like problem market fit and solution market fit, product market fit. Like, it was just knowing that, not realizing quick enough that actually what we were validating at the very beginning was just a problem market fit. Like, having huge amounts of users sign up in droves to your platform isn't the signal that you've got product market fit.
Interesting.
You've got a problem that people really want to have solved. And then it's about that next part. It's about the conversion.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize that early on enough. And I think if we had, I think we'd probably be 6 months ahead of where we are at the moment.
Lovely. Daniel, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. So many pearls of wisdom in this episode. You're doing great things at Kalda. I'm sure your journey will be onwards and upwards from here. So wishing you all the very best. And thank you so much again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Steph.
And thank you so much for listening. Really hope you've enjoyed this episode. Hopefully see you next time.